Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my good friend, Matt. Matt, what's going on, man?
Hey, not much, Mark. I'm doing well. I know you didn't ask how I'm doing, but I'm doing well.
I said, what's going on? That's good enough. How are you doing?
Gee, thanks. I appreciate that. I'm doing great, Mark. How are you today?
Oh, man, I'm doing great. And we are not in the Bourbon Life studios today.
No, that's right. We are elsewhere.
Yeah.
We've taken the show on the road.
Man, like professionals almost, right?
That's right. We're just professionally terrible at this. We're there.
Yeah, we got a great show lined up, man. But we'll get to that in just a second. But before we do that, I want to thank our sponsors. First, birthdays. We have no birthdays for our Barrel Society members. So I thought I'd throw that out there, So people didn't think I forgot.
Good. That's okay. I
always forget.
I was going to make fun of you for announcing that there are no birthdays.
There are no birthdays.
But you have a reason for it.
So I have a reason for it,
You're
Matt.
on top of it.
A method to my madness. And all right, so let's thank our sponsors. The Stave Restaurant out there in Millville, Kentucky, making some great food. Chef Kyle Klatka, just a great guy out there. Check them out online at thestaverestaurant.com. I'm sorry, thestavekentucky.com. Man, I always screw that up. But check them out. They're out there between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve on McCracken Pike. They're just making some great food. So we appreciate their sponsorship. And then also Three Chord Bourbon. We appreciate their sponsorship as well. Master Blender Ari Sussman, just doing a great job with what they're putting out. And they just sent us a bottle of that strange collaboration, Matt, that we tried during the podcast last year. That's going to be an annual release or regular release for them now.
Thanks for telling me they sent us that. I didn't know.
Matt, I got a bottle of strange collaboration at home.
Yeah,
I might share
stashed away in the Bourbon Life vault.
We'll have to break that out
Where all
sometime.
the good stuff is, you don't tell me.
All right, Matt, come on. Let's move it on.
Tell
everybody who we have with us today.
All right, so we are on the road and we are taking it out of state. We are down in Nashville, Tennessee, and joining us,
Nashville.
That's right. Joining us are the co-founders of Pennington Distilling Company, Jeff and Jenny Pennington. Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Glad to be here. Yeah. Exciting.
Yeah, we're happy to be here too. Thanks for the invite. We don't get to take the show on the road that often, so this is only probably the fourth time maybe?
And this is actually the first time it's not pouring rain.
Oh, that's right, man.
Usually we're schlepping gear from the car.
That's right.
In a deluge.
Because we did Wilderness Trail. It was nasty and miserable. Yeah. And then we went to William Tarr downtown Lexington, and it was miserable.
Yeah, we did. And then when we were in Nulu, Prohibition.
That's right. It was raining.
Yeah, it was raining cats and dogs.
Man, fourth time's a charm.
Where's Nulu?
Prohibition Craft. Yeah,
Prohibition Craft Spirits.
Yeah, he sources stuff over there from MGP, but then he blends it and barrels it and toasts it and
That's one I haven't heard of. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. They're doing some really good stuff. I mean, we Chase Hazelbaker. Thanks, Matt. I had the Chase part. Yeah, but they're doing some really cool stuff, and it's really funny the way that we were talking about that on the way down here. How he's managed to set it up that they do a lot of like bourbon clubs, bourbon groups, and private barrel picks. So kind of similar, I guess, really like to what Mike and those guys did with Nashville Barrel, where they started out and they just started doing a lot of single barrel picks for people. And now they're starting to blend some of their own stuff. But anyway, we didn't come here to talk about Chase.
No kidding. I was gonna cut you off, but I'm glad you stepped in there. We've got great guests today, tonight, this evening, this morning, whenever it is
you're listening.
Yeah. So now before we do that thing we always do.
Yeah, that's right.
We've got something poured up. So
that's right. Who wants to tell us about?
Yeah, Jeff or Jenny, why don't you let us know what we've got poured up for round one? Because we have a terrible habit of getting about 10 or 15 minutes into the show and not even mentioning what we're drinking.
So today we're going to be drinking some Davidson Reserve.
Okay.
We've got a Tennessee whiskey, a Tennessee bourbon, and then we've actually, instead of the rye, we did our Genesis bourbon.
Okay.
So we're going to start off with our Tennessee whiskey. Each one of our mash bills kind of emulate one of our favorite whiskeys or styles, right? So with this one, we've always liked, up in Kentucky where you're from, we've always been big Four Roses fans. Yeah, I've always loved the floralness of it, It's got a lot of good notes. It's a higher rye. It doesn't take the gravity super high. Likes to leave some residual sugar behind. And so we this is a similar style, but a Tennessee whiskey. Obviously, it's charcoal mellowed, and obviously the environment here. So this is 70% Tennessee white corn, 25% Tennessee white cereal rye, 5% malted barley. So it's a very low malted barley, but a higher rye content. So
there you go, Matt.
All right.
Right in your wheelhouse, right?
That's right.
Yeah, definitely. Nice. So what's the age on this one?
This is this is a blend of about 5 to 6 year old barrels.
Okay.
This actually won double gold and best in class last year for Tennessee at San Francisco.
Nice.
So
very nice.
We call it more of a bourbon style Tennessee whiskey. It's very light charcoal mellow. We don't do a slow drip. We let it go through very quickly. We want to be more of an additive than a subtractive. So
Gotcha.
We're big fans of more viscous whiskeys. So
very nice, Matt. What do you get on this, man? What are you picking up on the?
The nose has a lot of honey. I pick up a lot of sweetness from honey. A little bit of fruit, almost like honeysuckle with something floral. There's like some flowers coming out at like a taste. It smells like a spring bloom almost, just like
man,
really nice.
How appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. Like
a
nice blooming like spring garden.
Yeah, a honeysuckle. When you said that, man, it's stuck in my mind now. So that's what I'm smelling. Jeff Jenny, it's your product. What do you guys?
He nailed it. I mean, that's what
Matt always nailed.
That's pretty much our notes. So I love it.
Yeah. That's why Matt's here.
It is spring. I saw in the news this morning. It's a super high pollen count today. So
great. I woke up and it looked like somebody punched me in the face. I mean, my eyes, both eyes. Of course, that could have had something to do with the whiskey I was drinking last night.
Did y'all come down last night and honky tonk it, or did you drive down this morning?
No, we drove down this morning.
Yeah, we hooked it down this morning. But you might have been the one kind of proverbially punching yourself in the face.
Yeah, I could have been, man. It was delayed. My birthday was just about a week and a half ago, so it was a delayed birthday party for me and my family, and I ended up staying up a little too late and drinking a little too much. But I'm going to blame it on the pollen. But
high pollen count.
Yeah, I really like the aroma of this. It's not really grain forward. I was just kind of expecting, I think, and I don't know why I think that when I think of Tennessee whiskey, that I think of more of kind of a grain forward. But do you pick up much?
No, I think the rye really goes a long way in this with the nose, bringing out some of the floral. I'm almost getting like a little bit of mint. Like there's a touch of like spearmint coming through on the nose as well. I think the rye really helps to bring in some character and mellow out some of the grain that sometimes you're saying you would get, Mark, but I don't pick up like any offensive grain or
offensive.
Well, sometimes
you're offensive.
Yeah, we're not a corn heavy.
Right.
So it's not we use a Tennessee white corn as well. We were lucky enough in the beginning to have some big distillers from Kentucky because we used to sell a lot of those brands come down and actually distill with us because there's no school.
Right.
We've all of our stuff is 100% grain to bottle. We don't source any juice from anywhere. So
nice.
You lay it down. You hope it's good in 5 years.
Right.
Really, there's the only people who know that are the people who've been doing it for centuries, decades and centuries. Right. So they can come down. They can kind of let you know what they can taste the distillate or nose it, and they'll know kind of where that's going to go.
Yeah.
And so for us, we like that Tennessee white corn. It's got just a little bit more starch, it's got a little bit more sweetness that we think comes through. I think it's where you get some of that honey forward.
Yeah.
But then we're probably twice the rye of your traditional Tennessee whiskeys. Because I think that's where the floral comes from and the spice and the candy. I like candy fruits. I always say one of my favorite ryes has always been Sazerac, just because it's like a candy rye to me. It's not a spearmint bomb. So,
and that's what's so funny, with Sazerac, because when they do the Buffalo Trace releases now up in Lexington or wherever, people are grabbing the Weller and people are grabbing the Eagle Rare and whatever, and the Saz just sits on the counter, so you walk in and it's like, no, I'm taking that. I'm taking the Saz. I mean, I love it. I love Saz for $25-$30 a bottle or whatever. Yeah. So it's a great deal. So let's talk a little bit about you guys. Now that we've introduced the whiskey, I forgot to ask, what's the proof on this? Is it 100?
It's 100 proof.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay. So
we only make 800 to 1,000 barrels a year. So we're trying not to be just your entry level whiskey. We want to be a bigger, bigger whiskey. Once you get used to tasting so many barrel proofs, the distillery, it kind of gets hard to drink anything less than 100 proof. I know it's kind of scary.
You keep putting premium in that car and driving it around. It's hard to go back to 87 octane again.
You're not going back to 87 after that, are you? No. It's funny because I'm sitting here sniffing on it still, and it's getting sweeter.
I think you're right, Mark. It's opening,
kind of getting into almost like a brown sugary type of aroma to me now that I'm starting to pick up.
Sometimes I get a little oatmeal cookie.
Oh yeah, I can see that. Yeah, definitely. It's funny how sweet it's just getting sweeter and sweeter as it sits in the. Of course, I'm twirling it around a lot. So let's talk about you guys now that we've talked about the whiskey. So tell us a little bit about who you all are and how you got into the industry.
You want to start with that?
Sure.
Ladies first.
All right. So Jeff and I both grew up in Franklin, Tennessee, which is about 30 minutes south of Nashville. And we actually went to high school together. We were in the same class, so we were buddies. And never dated in high school or anything, and went off to 2 separate colleges. After college, we both wound up working for competing liquor distributors here in Nashville. So It was pretty exciting to run into an old friend and somebody my age in general in the distributor world at that time, because it was pretty much all older people. And
Right.
So it was cool to be like, Jeff, we know each other. So we reconnected that way. And over time, things kind of turned romantic and we started dating. And now we're married and started a distillery. But so it's just cool to have both. I don't think we'd be distillery owners today if we hadn't started in the industry at some level. And I think we're both grateful that we got that distributor background, because it really taught us some fundamentals before putting the supplier hat on and, going down this path.
So what was it like? I mean, obviously you're working for different distributors, right? So you're competitors. So
yes,
that a little awkward there, maybe, or
we're both very competitive people too.
I think she's even more competitive than me. Back then, it was a vodka. You'd go into the bars and be 500 flavored vodkas and like 4 bourbons.
Right.
Yeah. So
right.
I remember she sold Sky and I sold Stoli and Absolute.
Oh, wow.
We'd go to the bar and you'd order shooters with your friends because you're 23, 24. And
right.
I turned around and my tablet the other night would just have Sky down it, where she was sneaking Sky. I was like, I can't turn this in.
He'd turn around and I'd tell Scotty, or I'd be like, make him Sky.
But she also got to experience, I always like to talk about Jenny had Sazerac her house had all the Sazerac brands. So I remember when she would come out and she was kicking off Fireball, and I'd be like, that's never going to do anything. That's never going to sell.
Everybody told me that. And I'm like, no, there's opportunity here. I can taste
Her
it.
market sold more Fireball than any the whole country combined at one point. Sazerac brought the sales team here, and so I was wrong on that one. Also, I remember when she used to give you flat screen TVs if you would buy Buffalo Trace.
No,
it was just she begged people.
Like bars and restaurants would be like, I don't want this. Oh, they were terrible to me about it. And I'm like, this is great whiskey. Back in the beginning, it was like Old Charter. If you out of stocked somebody on Old Charter, I mean, they were going to come unglued. That's all whiskey drinkers in Nashville wanted. I mean, it was really not a lot. I mean, it was crazy.
Couldn't give away Weller. Would just sit on the bottom shelf and collect dust.
Literally. Yeah. My girlfriend and I, we would drink Weller 107 every Friday and Saturday night because I could buy it from work. And it was like nothing. And now I send her screenshots of different like whiskey groups and stuff on social media when they're like geeking out over it. I'm like, we were so cool before,
Yeah.
This is
I
just
sold
our
Maker's
cash.
Mark, and so I was a diehard Maker's fan because I got to go into Bill Samuel's house and go to the Keeneland with them, on a trip. Which I still think Keeneland's so much cooler than Churchill, in my opinion.
I'm right there
They're
with
both
you.
fun, but I love Keeneland. But she'd always be like, "Oh, you got to start drinking Weller." I'm like, "No, Maker's," and then finally she switches me to Weller when I leave, and then all of a sudden you can't get it.
Yeah. So now, you're obviously Weller's wheated too. So you're a wheated fan, I guess then. Or?
Oh yeah, that's in our bourbon. When we get to that,
Okay.
that will be wheated. So
Gotcha.
Okay.
we kind of took our favorite. There's not a lot of Tennessee whiskeys. There was 2, so we kind of took some of the styles we liked, and our rye was based on that 95.5 that everybody loves from MGP, but it's our own twist. Mm-hmm. Our wheated was based on kind of the Maker's Weller.
Gotcha.
That's our bourbon, and then our Tennessee whiskey is based on more of Four Roses or Buffalo Trace style mash bill. But with our own, but we put our own twist, but we kind of looked at those styles and what we liked. And we were lucky enough to go up and work, Makers let us come up there for a few days and work with the master distiller. And,
awesome.
Jack Daniels would open their doors and we could take our guys down there for, do full tours. And, Larry Brissalt, obviously everybody knows him. It's no secret. He came down and distilled with us for a couple of weeks from the beginning. And then a couple other master distillers from Kentucky that we can't really name came down. And so the Genesis, actually, when we get to that what's fun is that's the first 25 barrels we made. And it's with a few Kentucky guys, so we didn't charcoal mellow it. We didn't want to do that in front of them. So that's
like you're ruining that bourbon.
We release about three or four barrels of that each year. It's our birthday whiskey. So, but It's a cool example of what we get there of the Tennessee whiskey really not charcoal mellowed and charcoal mellowed 6 years later.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Yeah, looking forward to trying that. So Matt, getting back to the whiskey, what are you picking up on the taste on this one?
I think the taste and the palate really rings true to the nose. It's not one of those. It's not a bourbon or a Tennessee whiskey where you smell something and then throws you a complete curveball.
Right.
It tastes something different. It's got a nice nose of honey up front that leads to some floral. I'm picking up like a marshmallow too. I think the sweetness is kind of coming through in like a toasted sugar or some sort of a sweetened confection sugar as well.
I like the rye I mean, it's spicy, you know, I mean, 25% rye.
25% rye.
Yeah. I really like that. I like the feeling on your tongue, you know, it coats your mouth, but you get that kind of that tingle sensation of the rye.
Either he's got a great palate or he read our tasting notes.
I mean,
like
I'm going to hire Matt to do our tasting
No,
notes.
if you read it, we hired Ashley Barnes, who used to be with Four Roses and Sazerac. She does all our blending. But on the notes, that's one thing she always gets, the toasted marshmallow.
Yeah, it's got a nice like oily feel to it. Mm-hmm. Good coating of the tongue. Good palate. It's a big hit. I think you all did a great job with it. No doubt about that.
That's why Matt's here. I mean, you know, other than the fact he's got that velvety smooth voice, his tasting notes are just spot on. So, and we joke about this. We had Jane Bowie and Amanda Humphrey from Maker's Mark. They're on the show that's on right now for this week, and they were just talking about Matt like just nailing all the tasting notes and everything. And I'm just like, caramel and vanilla.
Right. You're like, again, caramel and
that's
vanilla.
It. And Matt's just like, no, I get stone fruit and I get a little apricot and then I get this. So, yeah, Matt does a good job.
When I first started at 21, 22, and I was selling wine at first, and you know, you get there and I always just judge, do I like it or do I not like it?
Right. Yeah,
that was my judge.
The binary system.
Label. I'm like, ugly label, pretty label.
Whenever I had to do a group, if I didn't know, I'd just be like, star fruit. And they'd be like, oh, yeah, because nobody knows what that tastes like.
Yeah. Oh, man. So, Jeff, tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry as well.
Same thing. After college, actually, I kind of graduated and didn't really know what I wanted to do, like probably most people that go to college. And I remember opening up the newspaper, and most people probably don't know what those are anymore, but back then in 2001,
for you young people,
you open the newspaper, and I just started circling jobs that sounded fun, and everything required 2 to 4 years sales experience that I liked. And I was like, well, I guess I should probably get some sales experience.
Yeah.
And so I bartended through college, and one of the sales reps that sold us liquor walked in one day. I was like, you're in sales? You're like, who do you work for? Like, oh, liquor distributors. And I didn't know how the three-tier system.
Yeah.
So I just started sending out resumes to a bunch of wine and spirits distributors around the state. Got a few interviews and luckily got a job within 2 weeks of graduating. And
nice.
Started in the grunt position of going out and merchandising and just stacking cases, and worked my way up to retail wine, and then got to go to on-premise and kind of experience a little bit of everything. And we had a great portfolio. I was really lucky at our distributor. We had a really nice portfolio of a lot of great brands. Got to go to a lot of distilleries, a lot of wineries, learned a whole lot over about a decade, I think roughly 9 years there. And when Jenny and I were dating for about the first year, you know, we couldn't tell anybody, because back then, you know, you can't date people at work. Now it's like no big deal.
So competitive. They were crazy about it.
Yeah, my bosses used to be like, oh, good. When they found out, they're like, steal all her pricing. And I'm like, what? And her boss was like, oh, she's going to give away everything, because it was such a double standard.
Right.
Really, she was
So
way more
sexist.
competitive than me.
That's
you
funny.
know,
Yeah, I'm like, little do you know, I've gone through his whole portfolio when he's like in the shower.
Now, you know, I'm not going to embarrass you guys, but I'm going to embarrass you because I understand. I think I saw or read somewhere that maybe you guys got busted. Your relationship, how that happened. Can we talk about that? Because I thought that was kind of funny.
The parking garage.
The parking garage.
Sounds so
I
much
forgot
worse.
about that.
Yeah, I read that somewhere. I was like, I've got to ask about the parking
Well,
garage.
when we were secretly dating, so we couldn't go anywhere that alcohol was sold. You know, else you could run
Right.
into coworkers or peers in the industry.
Calypso Cafe was a big date night.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, it was like, let's go to Shoney's, I guess,
Yeah,
right?
there
Like,
you go.
where do they not have booze?
Nashville was a lot smaller back then.
Yeah, it really was. Like, we had so many fewer restaurants and stuff. But so movies was, you know, that's a dark place.
Right.
No
Yeah, there you go,
alcohol.
right.
So we went to the movies one night and we were in the parking garage, and I remember we were like kissing, standing outside of our car, and all of a sudden we hear this voice, and it's a girl's voice. Yeah, yells out, "I know you!" And we both turn around, and she's like bent down, peering through the thing in the parking garage, pointing at us. We're like, all right, the cat's coming out of the bag.
She's a local bartender downtown. We both called on. We're like, guess we should tell our bosses now. Because like any other industry, we thought, in the spirits industry, rumors spread fast.
Sure.
I'm sure that's probably any industry you're in, right? So we're like, oh, this will take like 24 hours. So might as well go tell them.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to embarrass you guys, but I thought that was really fun. So wanted to know. So then while you guys were working in the industry, was that how you all developed your passion to do this where you are now? I mean, was that really how that started, or how did you really get into that?
A little bit. I mean, it kind of took us a little different direction. I mean, at first, we knew we wanted to do our own brand. We used to laugh at these brands that the big guys, the innovation that these big guys would bring in. We're like, man, I got to go sell this mango banana cream, and I got,
And you're like, I just feel guilty even to having to bring this to a bar manager.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't want to do this.
You walk in with your head down.
And your job is to show it. So you have to go show it.
With
Like,
a good attitude. You're like, I've been drinking this every night. Let me tell you. It's amazing.
We'd have to do a destock the bar party at our houses because all the, the stuff that they would send us. And so we just thought, we remember asking my boss one time, who at these companies comes up with these ideas? And his answer was great. I think it's a lot of short-term people making long-term decisions. I was like, that's sad, but sounds true.
Sounds true.
But we actually, when we decided to get married, we both left the companies and started two companies, a marketing company that Jenny still owns and runs. It's a event activation company for ambassadors. And then we started a digital advertising business that really focused on restaurants and bars in the liquor industry. So we were still kind of in the industry, but in a different way.
Right.
Like working with our friends and things in a different capacity. So now they're like buying advertising from us to display on this digital advertising network we've created.
And hiring us to do activations at bars and promos and come up with the marketing side. Because, we were still young. That's what we liked doing. And so a lot of suppliers, even competitive suppliers, we worked pretty much with all the distributors. And then, one of my favorite people in the spirits industry that I used to start in and watch it was a guy named Sidney Frank. And I just thought what he did was brilliant with Jägermeister.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And then Grey Goose and then Gekakon Sake and just how he would go and find these brands and bring them in the U.S. and just how he would grow them. So we're like, so about 18 months into the digital signage company, someone called and made us an offer to buy the software we had built. And we're like,
it wasn't even for sale.
Yeah.
And this was 2 weeks before our wedding. I'm like, hallelujah.
And we were both like, you know what? We really miss the spirits industry software and dealing with programmers and it's not our forte.
Selling advertising. Oh,
and they made us an offer that was worth more than it was. We're like, sweet. So we're like, you know what? Let's get married and let's go find our own brand. And so we took 3 weeks off after we sold it. We traveled around Europe. And our goal was to find a brand that we could import and start an import company. Because at the time, there was no distilleries allowed in Tennessee yet. This was 2008, 9. They were just now talking about the law changing. And no matter where we go, from Istanbul to Greece to Spain to France to England, I don't care if it's a bartender or a cab driver, you say Tennessee and everybody in the world knows two things.
Jack Daniels
and Elvis Presley. And a lot of Dolly Partons. Yes. A lot. Everybody knows those two, music and whiskey.
Right.
And, it's kind of hit us because I sold bourbons. I didn't sell Jack or George at my distributor. I sold Makers and Wild Turkey.
Right.
And so, not that I didn't like Jack, I just didn't know much about it. I knew it was a big brand.
Right.
I had no clue how big worldwide it was. This is kind of my first time outside the States. And we started looking at the back bar, and what we found, one, was there's not a lot of craft brands over there either. It's mostly big brands.
Zero.
Yeah.
Like zero. And we started realizing, we're in Tennessee, and we kind of heard chirping of the laws changing. And we're like, why are we not, all right, if we're in Tennessee, we export more Tennessee whiskey than the whole country combines of exporting wine and beer. Why are we not, so it kind of hit us. There's, look at all the hundreds of bourbons. Because I remember when we'd go out and sell bourbons, people were like, I already got 3 bourbons. Why do I need another one? Right.
Yeah.
And we beg and plead, like, oh, please, come on, trying to explain Maker's 46 to them.
Here's the TV.
I kind of want to go back and like see them all.
She literally
you know?
Yeah.
And so we're like, now that, in the next 3 or 4 years, we start to see a little bit more whiskey, nothing like now.
Right.
We're like, there's 50 great bourbons from Kentucky, 100 now, 200, who knows? But there's only really one Tennessee whiskey. There's 2, but George Diageo didn't do much with George Dickel. It's a great brand, by the way. But we're like, why don't we do our own? And so we came back and shook the tin can. Anybody would listen to us with money, and took us a couple of years to kind of get off the ground. We decided to launch with Whisper Creek, Tennessee Sipping Cream, because we kind of looked at, there's that Bailey's that nobody competes with, and why can't Tennessee have its own sipping cream? And
Hey, I tell you what, Jeff, let's take a quick break, because that's going to be our the next question, and the next segment is talking about how the distillery got started.
Sweet.
Okay.
So we'll take a quick break, and we'll jump back into that. Matt, right? Remind me what the question was.
Sipping cream.
Sipping cream.
Yep.
So let's wrap up our thoughts on this one, though, before we take a break. So what are your final thoughts on this one?
I'm a huge fan of this.
I
think it hits right on. It's got a lot of really good flavor and a lot of distinct flavor too. It's not just caramel and vanilla, like Mark might taste on some things, but it's got character. It's got personality, and I like it. It's a cool choice to take your spin on a Tennessee whiskey. Something that everybody, I think, when they hear Tennessee whiskey, one specific brand and one specific name comes to mind. So it's nice to see something different out there, but still calling it Tennessee whiskey and not completely just trying to go a separate route for this. So I think you did a good job of breaking that mold.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
Our goal with this is to show people, if you think all Tennessee whiskey is going to taste like Jack, then I guess all bourbon tastes like Beam.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair point.
And there's a lot of great new Tennessee whiskeys that people are now coming out with their own juice and the different recipes, and it's showing that, hey, we can be just as complex and different.
Right. Well, and we all know that Tennessee whiskey really is, well, we'll save that.
We'll save that for later.
All right. So with that said, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with more with Jeff and Jenny Pennington with Pennington Distilling. Hey, Bourbon Lifers. When you're out hunting for those hard-to-find bottles or just enjoying the distilleries of Central Kentucky, you're going to work up an appetite. And when it's time to refuel, we suggest that you visit our good friends Rebecca and Eric Burnworth at the Stave Restaurant. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, close to Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, the Stave Restaurant is just off the beaten path, nestled on the banks of Glens Creek. With a newly redesigned menu, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day featuring an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. You can take our word for it. The food alone is worth the trip to the Stave. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. And you can even purchase bottles of bourbon to take home with you while you're there. Make sure to follow the Stave on Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky, or visit them online at thestavekentucky.com to stay up to date on everything that's going on. The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise, right here in the heart of bourbon country. All right, everybody, welcome back for round 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me still is my buddy, Matt.
Through thick and thin, my friend.
Man. That's right. How you doing over there, Matt?
Mark, I'm doing great. I'm actually doing really well. We had a great first round, and I'm still really impressed with what we were drinking on that first round.
Yep, I agree with that, definitely. So let's jump into the second round here and what we got poured up for our second taste. So, Jeff, you want to tell us what we got? So
this is our bourbon, Tennessee bourbon, obviously, because it's all made here, but we don't call it Tennessee whiskey because this has not been charcoal mellowed through Tennessee sugar maple. I think most people know that difference. With our bourbon, we actually kind of, like we spoke about earlier, we've always been big wheat fans, selling Weller and Makers, and I was always a Makers drinker. I think, like most people, I feel like Makers is like the gateway bourbon.
Gateway bourbon. Yeah.
It's sweet, it's easy, it's it's delicious, but it's an easy startup bourbon, and I think it hooked probably a lot of people my age that were kind of 80s babies that got into it, and but we did a little bit different recipe. We did 60%. We still use all local grains, but 60% Tennessee white corn instead of the yellow number 2. We used 22% red winter wheat and 18% malted barley. We don't charcoal mellow it. What we learned from research is they always teach you rye equals dry, wheat equals sweet, kind of when you start off in the industry of learning those. But what I learned is wheat's actually neutral, and it allows the sweetness from the barrel and the sugars from the barrel and the other grains to come through more. And that's what creates a sweeter profile. So we did not charcoal mellow this. We found when we charcoal mellowed the wheat that it would actually kind of bland the whiskey out a little bit. You need some more fused oils from the corn and rye to really partner with that wheat. I think if we did charcoal mellow this, it would make a great entry level whiskey. But we didn't want to do too much charcoal mellowing to it because we thought it would add too much sweetness and kind of take too many of the fused oils out that we need to partner with that wheat.
Gotcha.
So we call it bourbon. It's our red label. We actually waited on this about an extra year and a half. This is about a 6-year-old blend.
Okay.
What we found is wheat can stand the test of time a little bit better. It needs that barrel more. So this has become really, Jenny will tell you, my daily drinker now. I love this. This actually, just to give a little shout out, since we won Tennessee whiskey last year, we entered in the bourbon category this year.
Nice.
We got double gold on our single barrel bourbon with San Francisco, which can't happen unless every judge gives you a blind. And then Sips came out just a couple days later, and we actually got best in class of single barrel bourbons up to 10 years old. And that's against the Kentucky guys. So we were feeling pretty good the last week. But this one to me it's definitely going to be it's not as floral in the nose to me. Actually, I would love Matt to give me his nose.
I was going to say,
he does the great
Matt, what are you picking up on this one, Matt?
Well, I go through it. So did you try different mash bills before you settled on, you said what, 60, 22, 18?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Because that seems like a weird mash build, 60, 22, 18. So this was obviously trial and error, and this was what hit the sweet spot for you all?
Yeah. We really wanted to be very wheat forward. We've actually got some wheat whiskeys that are about 6 years old we haven't released. I'm a big wheat fan, obviously. I love wheat or rye, but my favorite whiskeys have always been heavier rye or heavier wheat and less corn. I know there's a lot of great heavy corn forward bourbons, but so that's kind of always been our take. I figure if I have to drink something, I might as well like it. I have to drink it the rest of my life.
Exactly right. And this is what, 1017?
Yeah, 101.7.
Okay.
It's a shout out to our whiskey birthday, 1017.
Oh, okay. Nice.
There's always some hidden message.
There's a hidden message
in
there. Okay.
everything we do.
I got you. No, that's really cool, Matt. So now you're back on the spot again.
Yeah. All right. I avoided it long enough, but I get a lot of times with wheat, and going back to Weller that we were talking about earlier, I sort of use that as a test to what I taste and what I smell in a wheat, because I get a lot of cherry, I get a lot of oak from Weller, but I don't pick up as much cherry on this, but I get stone fruit, I get plum, I'm thinking like red wine fruits, like a little bit of maybe like a blackberry or a currant almost. There's also some graham cracker. I think maybe the barrel is giving it a little bit of like a baking spice or a graham cracker, just like a sharp sort of a baking smell that I might associate with a graham cracker, and then some oak coming through as well on it. You can tell it's spent a little time in the wood.
We toast all our barrels too.
Okay.
Before we char them. So I think a graham cracker, I think that's where it gets some of that. The toasting gets some of that kind of graham cracker nose.
Well, everything that Matt said plus caramel and vanilla.
Yeah,
I definitely. I don't know how he missed those two.
I mean, come on, Matt. How could you miss that? It's bourbon, caramel, and vanilla, man. So, all right. So now we've introduced this. We were talking about the distillery, Jeff. So let's throw it to Jenny and talk about the distillery. And Jeff was telling about how you all started with the Whisper Creek, right? So can you pick that up?
Yeah. So basically, we went from thinking we're going to import a brand to realizing the laws were changing in Tennessee. It was giving us an opportunity to open a distillery and create our own brands. So we wanted to come up with something that we could use younger whiskey, because obviously we did not want to launch our whiskeys are going to sit on in the barrel till they're aged properly and everything. So we needed something that we could use a younger whiskey for. And we thought, every place we went, you always see Irish cream. It seems universal. Like Jeff mentioned, everybody knew Tennessee. They might not know what California was, but they knew what Tennessee was. It's crazy. So we just thought, what about doing like a Southern version of an Irish cream, like an American take on it, with a Southern twist? So Whisper Creek was born. It's our flagship brand. I don't think we came out with another brand for 4 years later.
3.5.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was our total focus. Meanwhile, he's making whiskey and aging it for the longer play, which, was Davidson Reserve down the road. But Whisper Creek's our baby. And we went out of the gate, started distributing it practically nationwide. And then kind of dialed that back. Jeff can speak to that more, but just kind of got a little bit more targeted to the Southeast, and it does really well, and it has a big fan base. So
that's, you're using your own whiskey for that, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we were trying to think of things we could do with younger whiskey.
Gotcha.
Was kind of the idea. And then in 2014, when we decided to get into the vodka business, we realized if we keep using up all our young whiskey, we're not going to have older whiskey. And to be honest, we were so tired of selling flavored vodkas that we didn't really want it. We tried to avoid as long as we could to do a vodka. But then we realized we needed cash, and so we started Pickers Vodka, and that's kind of been our breadwinner for the last 5 or 6 years. It's a lot bigger than we ever thought. We kind of came out with our own inside joke of 11 times distilled, because everybody talks about the number of distillations, and we just went back to Spinal Tap. And it's like, oh my God, goes to 11.
I mean, when Jeff and I worked at the distributor level every week, I mean, you literally had another company coming in. They're like, our vodka's the best because it's, filtered through diamonds and this and that. And we're just like, are you kidding me?
I still love that. Some guy did come in and say this. Awesome. They filtered it through diamonds. And I was like, so I raised my hand. I said, aren't diamonds like one of the densest substances on earth? Was that pickup? And he just got all angry. It's very expensive.
Well,
we can go out and tell everybody that we use diamonds.
Exactly. We had an aversion to vodka, even though I love it now and drink it quite frequently. But we
regularly, like it's in my water bottle, right?
Right. This is awesome water. So we were in New Orleans at Tales of the Cocktail one year, and like Jeff said, shaking the tin can. We're totally bootstrapping. We still are. I mean, we always work hard and are trying to build this brand. But, times were tough. Like, we're just getting started, and we're down at Tales of the Cocktail with a bunch of friends, and a girl walks in the bar, and she's wearing this shirt, and it says "Vodka pays the bills." And Jeff and I literally...
It might have been like 1:32 in the morning.
Yeah, it didn't matter. I mean, we looked at each other, and there were no words spoken, and we were just like, Yep. We're going to make a vodka. What are we doing?
Yeah.
So Pickers was born.
You got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah.
So that was kind of a period. I guess you guys kind of went through a reset. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, in 2014, when we decided to do that, our original partner that we worked with the distilling side with, he liked making whiskey. He didn't like marketing whiskey. The first brand we did with him was a great brand called Collier & McKill. But I think we made the mistake, and we learned he did and we did, that put it out too young. When you need cash flow, you put that whiskey out 6 months and a year old in smaller barrels, and
right. Mm-hmm.
And even though it was 2 and 3 years old and it was so much better, and it was hard to get people to go back and try it. So we said, all right, and we talked to him, so we ended up parting ways. We bought him out, and he actually now has a huge distillery, raised new money, and he just does contract distilling.
Nice.
He's got the second largest distillery in the state. Nobody even knows it exists. It's all contract distilling. He's bigger than George Dickel. It's got 2 big old columns running.
No kidding.
Yeah, I go down there and visit. I'm like, man, you got yourself a big boy distillery.
Yeah.
He's contract distilling for a lot of the Tennessee folks and outside, just laying down, I think like 200 barrels plus a day.
Wow.
So we had a partner that used to own my distributor actually sold it. And so he called me one day, and we were in this. He said, I don't want to retire. Y'all need money? And I was like, yeah, we make whiskey. Of course we need money. So we got to reset, and we sold off all the whiskey we had made. Kind of that brand got sold off to another company. And we got to start over with the whiskey process. And so that's why we consider October 17th when we laid down our first new whiskey.
Gotcha.
And so we learned from that day, like, we're not going to try to cheat time. I've tasted a lot of craft whiskeys that try all these processes to super age whiskey. And I've yet to taste one that doesn't taste like young whiskey with wood shoved in it.
Yeah.
I hope someone figures it out. I think that's the beauty of craft distillation. Someone probably will eventually, but I have not found anything that cheats time. And there's no specific to time. A barrel's its own individual personality.
Right.
So, time isn't the end all of how a whiskey tastes. You can also over barrel whiskey really quick too. So, but we also knew that we wanted to wait. We didn't want to jump out too early again. So, luckily when we started doing vodka, it got a lot bigger than we ever thought. But when we were selling vodka, you couldn't give away Tito's. I mean, it's been around for 25 years.
Right. Like it was
Nobody
all
wanted
imported
American vodka.
Huh.
Yeah.
If it wasn't imported, it wasn't seen as good. But then when we
Right.
looked at it, we're like, okay, now people are Americanizing. It was Tito's, it's Deep Eddy, it's New Amsterdam, it's Craft.
And we're sitting here in Nashville, like we have the coolest city,
Right. Yeah.
And why don't we have a vodka? Like we need something that's
Jenny hates it when I say this, but we put up on our board, our music's better than Austin, so our vodka should be too.
I don't hate it.
I like that.
Yeah.
funny.
So it's, even though we were kind of opposed to doing a vodka, we're super proud of Pickers and proud that we have something that's like Nashville's, brand.
Picker, obviously,
Like a
kind of the
guitar,
guitar
yeah.
picker.
Like a guitar.
Being in Nash Vegas down here, right?
Yeah.
So
The bottle's got the frets, and it's got embossed in with the
nice.
frets and strings on it. So it's very, everything we do's got some kind of ode to Tennessee heritage. So
Nice.
Whisper Creek's kind of got the hills and the mountains and the heritage to it. Davidson Reserve is actually Davidson County.
Davidson County, right?
And then Pickers kind of, we just, without calling it Nashville.
Right. Yeah.
Davidson, if you're from here, you'll get it. If not, it sounds regal.
Yeah, it does. It's like,
Right. It's very sophisticated. So.
Davidson. Davidson sounds really impressive. I like Davidson. Who is he? But I love the bottles too. The bottles are really cool. So was that you're doing, Jenny?
Yeah, so I do all of our packaging design and stuff, which I love. When I worked at the distributor level, that was definitely something that I became known for. I mean, the wine, even though I was on the spirit side, the wine director would come to me and he'd be like, okay, which ones do you like? Because, and we weren't opening them. I was not tasting them. It would literally be like, love that, hate that. That will sell, because retail, it's all about the looks. You're not popping it open and trying it. So, but yeah, I love it. It's just so fun. And Davidson, hasn't really changed that much as far as packaging. It will. All of our brands evolve over time, I feel like, and we make little subtle changes. But I just wanted something that was classic and sophisticated looking. And
Yeah, I really like the bottle design is really cool. I love those thick bottles at the bottom.
It's
I love that glass.
It's a bottle worth keeping to use as
Yeah.
a decanter or something down the line.
One thing she added to it is the leather neck straps pop off and make keychain holders or clip
cool.
onto your golf bag or
Very nice.
just a little keepsake.
so Jeff will randomly see some dude, with 12 of them on his golf cart.
There's a guy at the golf course that has them up and down his bar. And
He's
I was
like, I love this
I
guy.
love your support, but man, you should. Saying,
Jeff's we have a recycling program.
We also have a 12-step program in case you're interested. Now I saw those earlier because I was looking at your little gift bags over here that you have wrapped up, and I noticed the neck tags on that, and that kind of pays a little tribute, I guess, to maybe some Four Roses, because Four Roses has the leather neck tags as well. But that's really cool. The design, the label, even the font of the Davidson Reserve itself is just really.
I like that the mash bill's right on the front too. You came right out and put it on there. Some people try to hide these things.
Our quality. We focus on quality, craftsmanship, authenticity, and transparency and resourcefulness are kind of our core values. And we don't want to go out and talk about what everybody else does. We do a lot of source co-packing here. I mean, there's a lot of brands that come here. NBC does their stuff
For
here.
other
Belle Meade, Chattanooga, all these. We've done a lot of bottling. Co-packing's been a big part of our business to keep us alive. We're proud that now that NBC's moving, they're going to be the 8th distillery in Tennessee that started here with us.
Nice.
And they helped us. They helped keep our bills paid too. So it's a I've had a couple other small craft guys like, I can't believe you're helping these guys. I'm like, they're helping me.
No, that's cool.
But we really wanted. It's so hard to know what's sourced and what's not. And if that's going to be, if we want to go out there without saying, oh, they do this or they do that, we wanted to be as transparent on the label as we could. And so couldn't go and change the laws of the terms because there's a decent sized distillery that won't let you touch the definition of anything. So I really love the strip stamp at the bottom with all that information on it though.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I'm just curious because you're in a situation where obviously you're looking for money. but you decided to make vodka. What was it that kept you from saying, you know what, let's just go buy some barrels and, blend it and just put it out under a label? Or did you guys do that at some point? I didn't think you did. So what drove that decision? I mean, what really made you say, no, we're just not going to do it that way?
Just to differentiate.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest with you,
it just meant a lot to Jeff that it's authentically made here. And
I don't know if I was right or wrong. I'll be honest. When we first started it in 2011, we signed the lease here. I could go buy 4-year-old barrels of MGP for $450, $435 a barrel. Wow. Had I put everything I had into this into just that, I'd be reselling those, and I'd have a boat with the boat. We wouldn't be worried about talking here. But I was very concerned because when we started this, bourbon wasn't. This bourbon craze has been like the last 6, 7, 8 years. It was just starting when we were starting this, and I was a little nervous that if I locked myself into a sourced bourbon, how would I ever convert that to my own and keep the taste profile the same? And I'm beholden on someone else's supply.
Sure. Yeah.
And we actually talked about it. I went and met with a few different distilleries, and none of them would give me a contract that could guarantee me a certain lot every quarter or every year. It was you had to just buy what you could right then and hope it lasted. And then hope when you need more, there's more available. Right. And that just made me really nervous.
Yeah.
And I think that other brands are probably finding that pain now. Oh, yeah. To go buy, 4-year-old MGP barrel now, you're probably, I don't even know what the price is, but you're probably looking $2,500 to $3,500. Yeah. Well, now you got to be $70, $80 on the shelf. And it's very important. All of our brands we call craft without the craft price. So this bourbon and Tennessee whiskey is sub $40 on the shelf.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
that's impressive.
Yeah.
Pickers vodka is like $16.99, $22.99. Just,
Well, that's what Matt and I were, a 3-hour drive on the way down. You talk about a lot of stuff, but we were talking about a brand it's a sourced brand, and they're putting out a 12-year-old, I think is or something, whatever. It's an aged bourbon, but it's not theirs. They've sourced it obviously, and it's $225 or something a bottle. And I'm just like, I love bourbon, but I'm not going to go out and spend $225 on a bottle of bourbon that's sourced from somebody else, and just repackaged. And
it's probably delicious.
But the
problem is the person who's bottling it, they have to charge that just to make money.
Yeah,
because of what they probably paid for those barrels.
Right. Oh no, I agree. That's what. No kidding. That's the rub right there that you get into, is that you start sourcing and then you run out of supply, or you've got to charge such a fee on the bottles that
you're not in control.
Yeah.
And I can show you from at least 10 years ago, there's a numerous amount of brands that ran into that problem eventually, where their price points were not conducive with what they were going to have to pay for this bourbon now.
Right.
And so we just decided, being from Tennessee, we think there's room for there to be a Makers or Woodford or Four Roses of Tennessee. We think there's room for 4 or 5 of us. So we really wanted to be a Tennessee brand. Yeah. We think Tennessee's got a name. I know there's a Kentucky-Tennessee rivalry.
What?
Don't get Mark started.
Don't
get him started.
He hasn't listened to our podcast, has he?
Don't get him started.
Hey, I went to Tennessee, and I can tell you we're in a dark century.
I know.
I mean, it's when I went to school there, we were good. I don't know what happened.
I tell you what, it was a great day when we finally beat Tennessee in football. I actually was at the game, and
I was there.
Recorded it on my cell phone, just because it's like the Florida thing too. It took us 26 years to beat them, but we finally did it.
Yeah, but I think when y'all beat us, it was 26 or 27.
It was right at that.
I was there.
I know, it was crazy. Man.
I think we're getting there with Alabama now.
I think everybody's getting
there. A rivalry with them. I don't know if that's really a rivalry.
Well, I do poke fun at Jack Daniels, just because I don't drink Jack Daniels, but it is the Kentucky. I'm a lifelong Kentuckian, and there's nothing against Jack Daniels. It's just one of those things I like to poke at, because it's a Kentucky Tennessee thing, right?
You drink Woodford Reserve, right?
I do. I know.
So
it's the same. I drink
family.
Woodford. I drink Old Forester. So you know what? We got Brown Foreman covered. Yeah. Don't have to worry about their other brands.
We think that we're sitting on the same limestone plateau, right?
Right.
We've got the same resources. When the Whiskey Rebellion happened and everybody ran over the mountains, Tennessee and Kentucky's where they settled, because you had the springs, you had the limestone, you had the temperature swings, you had all the elements, you had the woods to hide in and the mountains to hide in. So the problem is Tennessee had just as many distilleries prior to Prohibition, but we just never came out. George was getting made up at Buffalo, where Buffalo Trace is now. I think Jack was in Missouri, maybe. I can't remember where they were until 1932. I mean, it was like 5 years after Prohibition. and it was only Lincoln County. So I do think that, we love Kentucky bourbons. You're not against it.
Awesome. Well, we love Tennessee. We have really, over the last few months, we've had we had Nelson's on last
we had
year.
Fawn Weaver,
with Uncle Nearest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So who else have we had on?
Old Dominic.
Have you had Old Dominic on yet?
Memphis? Yeah, we had Alex Castle on the show. So yeah, it's, as much as I love to I'm the Kentuckian that says, bourbon's got to be made in Kentucky.
You should have if y'all haven't reached out to Lee Kennedy at Leaper's Fork, he just released his first bottled and bond juice.
Oh, okay.
And it's
they're close by, right? They're like within 30 minutes.
They're within 30 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
Beautiful distillery.
Yeah.
It's out in Leaper's Fork's a very beautiful area of Tennessee. So.
Okay. Yeah.
Country.
They're on my list. Yeah, to contact. So definitely. But yeah, we've been really impressed with what we've been trying. What we've been tasting. So, and we like to do that obviously to spread the word and let other people know that there are more bourbons and whiskeys other than Kentucky bourbon.
Mm-hmm. I'm just glad to see American whiskey.
Yeah.
Gosh, in the 90s and 2000s, bourbon and Tennessee whiskey was like the poor man's rock gut whiskey, right? Scotch was the elitist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's fun to just see American whiskey as a whole, mainly Tennessee and Kentucky. Let's be face it. I'm sure we export 95% of it. But just to see people realize that it's just as complex, just as much history and stuff to it. So,
yep. Well, Matt, let's get back to the whiskey because we're at the end of round 2 here, but get some final thoughts on this one.
I think the nose as it's sitting out is getting sweeter.
Yeah.
Picking up much more of the toastiness, much more of the barrel coming through, more of the marshmallow, more.
I'm actually getting a little
sugar.
Leather off of this.
Huh.
But I'm close to the end of my glass too, so that might be
there's some more over here.
Yeah, I'm trying to pace myself. But.
The dark fruit that I had in the beginning, I think is switching, and more on the palate. I'm picking up apricot. It's switched over to a little bit more of a zestier fruit, a little citrus with the apricot. But it's just, again, it's got just a really great coating of the tongue, like a really, really nice oily taste to it that really leads to a really great finish. And the finish, again, is kind of coming through with some of that graham cracker on the finish as well. It just is great from nose to finish all the way.
I always get like a little, with this one, for some reason I always get a little nutmeg, almost a banana bread, not banana like Jack, but kind of like a banana nut bread finish to it. To me, this is oiliness is important to us. We, one of the first things when we had the 3 Kentucky guys come down is we talked about craft distilling in general, and they were like, everybody talks about making their cuts deep, you know. And all 3 of them said the same thing. I don't understand. Why would they want to cut out the flavor?
Yeah.
Because they're trying to sell young whiskey is why.
Yeah.
But so we learned that we cut the heads very healthily, but we like to let a little bit of the tails kind of get in there in those fusel oils because we like that oiliness. We think that's where the finish comes from.
Yeah. There's a lot of personality to be tasted down there at the tail end.
Yeah. That's what I was, as we were sitting here talking, I take a sip and that finish would just linger. And that's really, really a surprise to me how long that the finish on this one goes on. And it's almost, it's funny. It's not, I know it's not a rye, it's wheated, but I still get that spiciness a little bit on my tongue, which I really enjoy. So
yeah, all of them seem to have a little bit of allspice kind of flavor to it. This one I get a lot more brown sugar kind of maple start.
Right, yeah.
And then the finish kind of comes in later. But this has definitely become my daily one.
Yeah, I can see why.
No doubt about that.
All right, guys. Well, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with more with Jeff and Jenny Pennington with Pennington Distilling. Hey, Bourbon Lifers. We want to take just a second and tell you a little bit about 3 Chord Whiskey. 3 Chord's line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The 3 Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they call perfectly tuned taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them all together. After each blend is completed, the 3 Chord team then applies their proprietary process of pyrolysis, that's a lot to say, isn't it? Which involves heating American oak to precise temperatures to release specific flavor and aroma compounds. Then they use another proprietary method called rhythmic disruption process, and that's more than just playing music to a bunch of barrels, which integrates all of those related compounds into the blended spirit. Finally, Each small batch blend of 3 Chord is evaluated by a trained sensory panel to ensure an uncommon depth of flavor, character, aroma, and a perfectly tuned taste in each bottle. With their introductory blended bourbon, their Amplify Rye, Strange Collaboration, which is a Pinot Noir finished Kentucky bourbon, their 94 rated 12-bar Reserve, and the brand new highly coveted 15-year Kentucky bourbon they call the Whiskey Drummer, there's a lot of options available from 3 Chord. Like the feeling you get when you hear that perfect song, you'll know that the 3 Chord line of whiskeys are right from the first sip. They resonate with so much flavor, you'll want an encore. Find out more about 3 Chord whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.3chordbourbon.com. All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final session of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, he's hung in there with me today, my good friend, Matt.
That's right. It's like the Bourbon Life Road Show today.
Yeah, man, it's a good time.
Yeah, we are taking it on the road. We're in Nashville.
Nashville, Tennessee, man.
Yeah,
I heard during break that Matt ran all the way here.
Matt did. Matt ran 19 miles this morning before climbing in the car to...
Yeah, actually, and I'm going to ride my bike all the way back.
That's amazing.
That's what I told my wife. We were driving down here. She called, and I'm like, yeah, Matt ran 19 miles. I think his legs might lock up on him in the car. I said, but that's okay. He's got his bike on the back. He's just going to ride home.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, we've got great people to chat with. Enough about me. Everybody's heard it a million times over.
Well, but they haven't heard you qualified for the Boston Marathon.
Oh, that's awesome.
We didn't make that official now.
Yeah,
that's a big deal.
Thanks.
Congratulations.
He didn't even tell me.
Appreciate
I was
it.
like, we're in the car, and I'm like, did you hear anything from Boston by chance? He goes, oh yeah, I found out I qualified. I'm like, when did you find this out? He's like, oh, it was like 2 weeks ago. I'm like, what the hell? You don't even tell your partner, man. Your buddy, your bourbon drinking friend, man.
I had a buddy who was trying to qualify for that, and I guess Nashville's one of the ones that qualify, but he went somewhere else. So I was like, well, why? You live here? He goes, it's way too hilly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I qualified on a fairly flat course as well. So
He ran it here, but not for qualifying. He's like, no, I didn't realize that Nashville's marathon was a qualifier, but
Yeah, but the
So you
hills
all have the Music City Marathon.
Yes.
That was canceled again this year.
Yeah,
I
they're
think
trying to-
really last minute.
Yeah,
I thought it was
it's been-
canceled.
somehow for the last 8 years, it always downpours on that day. They had to cancel it one day, and there was people still on the course, and they made them stop. And I don't know how long people probably trained for that, but
a long time.
they
yeah.
wouldn't let them keep running because there was tornado warnings and stuff. They're like pulling them off the streets, and people were like, "No, I'm gonna finish this thing."
Finish this fucking race.
Right.
Trained for 6 months for this. Yeah, no doubt. All right, so we're back on the third and final session. Matt, we'll stop talking about you, man. But I just had to brag. Well, I had to brag on you, man. So it's a good thing you did there. So let's talk about what we got poured up for the third round here, Jeff. If you want to tell us what we got.
Yeah, so we decided to do something a little special. Our third mash bill is our rye, which we didn't take. We kind of skipped that, so there's 3. And then we have our 4 grain, which is a blend of our Tennessee and bourbon. But we decided to pull out the Genesis for you guys today, and I've got a bottle for you guys to take with you.
That's going home to the Bourbon Life Studios, Matt.
The Genesis,
We'll
I guess.
see where that ends up.
Need to figure out where that collaborative bottle is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is our we call this this is kind of our birthday bourbon. So with the first 25 barrels we laid down of our Tennessee whiskey, we had a bunch of Kentucky names down here with us, so we decided not to charcoal mellow those. Yeah. We put them in the barrels, and it's delicious. It's our same mash bill, 70-25-5. Mm-hmm. But being that it's not charcoal mellowed, it's in the same barrels. Everything else about it's the same. Same style barrels, same juice, same process. It's just not charcoal mellowed. So it's a really cool way to look at the difference between Tennessee whiskey and bourbon 6 years later. This is we do about 1,017 bottles. Not about. We do exactly 1,017 bottles.
About
give or take none.
Every year on 1017. So it's really cool. This is our 6-year-old bottled and bond version of this. Every year we do a little bit older.
Nice.
We're actually going to start a Solera system on it in a couple of years, because we laid down 20 each year after that. So we got backups, but we just to keep the original juice going, we'll probably start Soleraing it in a couple of years. And if we've done our math right, it should last about 53 years before we run out.
So what's Soleraing? Explain what Soleraing.
Solera is a big thing in Scotland, and cognacs and stuff, but it's basically just saving some of your juice.
Okay.
And each year you add a little bit of more. So
Okay,
when you
gotcha.
pull, you'll add a little bit more that gets older, then add a little bit more. So we'll pull it. So like you think of your Macallan 75s and your Grand Marnier Centenaires, they're not like all 75-year-old juice.
Right.
But there is some in there that's 75-year-old. I think that more and more Kentucky and Tennessee guys are starting to do some fun little Solera stuff. But yeah, we were just trying to figure out how can we make these barrels last as long as we can, because we keep eating, like, it was three barrels the first 2 years, and last year it took 4 barrels because it was a little bit older.
Right. Yeah, more evaporation, losing. Losing. You're going to be wringing out those staves by the time we get to like 12 or 15 years. Yeah.
I remember when we first harvested our first barrels, we freaked out because we were expecting after 4 years, when we did our 4-year bottle and bottleness, we were like, oh my gosh, we lost like 32%. We were expecting like 20 to 25.
Wow. So
that's when we reached out to our friends down in Lynchburg, and I called a guy down there. It's like, hey, can we come down? And we're losing a lot more. I'm like, oh yeah. And they came down and we started looking at the soak lines. And they've got staves from Woodford and Jack there. And the soak line is literally an 1/8 inch farther into wood because it's that much hotter here. So they temp control their warehouses down there to try to control that.
Sure.
We don't have that ability or money.
Right.
Plus, we really believe in the florafawn and letting that environment. But,
sure.
So we've definitely learned that we lose a little bit more here in Tennessee. There's a higher angel share, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Guess it's just a little bit. That's probably why we were in Prohibition longer. The Bible is there's more angels around.
So going back, talk about your barrels. Kind of alluding to that. Where do you guys? Can you talk about where you get your barrels from?
Yeah, we get our barrels from ISC, Independent Stave. So we
Mm-hmm.
started long enough ago that we were locked into that supply early. So when the barrel shortage kind of came around, we were grandfathered in and got to continue to work with them. They make, ISC, they make for all the big boys of bourbon. So we do a toasting on our barrels, and then we do a 4 char on the body, 3 char on the head.
Okay.
We store them in a lot of different places. We're real big believers of. We try to be as consistent as we can with the cooking and mashing. It's hard enough to be consistent in an inconsistent world, right, with the barrels and everything else. But our big thing is trying to do different aging areas and different aging techniques, as far as on the head, on the side, in a rick, on a pallet, in different types of buildings. And it's fun to see the differences that does, which then goes into the blending process, which I'd love to talk about in a little bit. But we think the blending of whiskey that's the most fun. If you make enough barrels, you're going to make some good single barrels. You can take. I heard actually yesterday at International Tennessee Whiskey Day, we had a toast, and Jeff Arnett was on there, and all the big guys, and they're telling barrel can hide a lot of problems, and it can mess up a lot of good stuff. You can take some subpar distillate and put it in a good barrel, and the barrel's going to fix it.
Right.
And vice versa. You can take some really good distillate and put it in bad barrels, and it can hurt it. So barrels, at least 50% of the flavor. I think it's closer to 70 to 80%.
Sure.
So you're going to make some good single barrels. The blending art of whiskey making is really an art form that I don't think everybody in Kentucky and Tennessee's always got these guys in the background that are big on it. I mean, the fact that these big brands can taste the same everywhere, that's really impressive.
Yeah.
That consistency.
It was super crazy to talk to Harlan Wheatley about that when we were talking about Buffalo Trace, because he was saying, when I go to make Buffalo, I know I got to take some from this floor of this brick house, 2 from the bottom of this house, 5 from up here, and like he knows his aging process. He knows where his barrels are going. He knows what he's going to get out of them, and that's.
A lot of people think like these majors are not craft, and Jeff and I look at the consistency and we're like, they're masters of their craft.
Yeah, absolutely. To do it on such a large level as well. Like if you throw a couple things off, suddenly you've got like, I don't even know how many bottles of Buffalo Trace or some huge product that might not taste the same. And to you and I, it might not be the same, but to a master distiller, they may look at it and be like, God, I really messed up on that one. That's
I mean, whether you like Jack Black or not, there's millions of people that do, but the fact that they sell 15 million cases that taste the same, and let me tell you, they've got single barrels and barrel proofs that I'll put up against anything. They're delicious, but they're making millions of cases for a certain profile.
Right.
And Buffalo Trace and Beam and Heaven Hill and all these majors that do that. It's really impressive, and I think that's an art form that us craft guys are going to learn real quick is not that easy.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be the test of time for the small guys is, hey, if we're doing 8 to 10 barrel batches, you can't hide a bad barrel.
Right.
Yeah, right.
You're doing 800 barrels, you might be able to get away with 1 or 2. So we profile our barrels with Ashley, who started under Harlan. That's where she trained, and then went to work under Jim Rutledge. And, the first thing she does is she profiles the barrels, and she gets them to 3 different profiles or 4 different profiles. And we harvest the like profiles together. And then we blend those juices together to try to make a consistent small batch. And then the extra juice we'll use for other projects or single barrels or special blends.
Yeah.
But it's not easy. You know, these big guys, they know which warehouses of which floors of which areas give certain flavors. So it's like, oh, we're missing a little vanilla or caramel.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, go to this warehouse and grab 200 barrels. You know?
Yeah. Yep.
Tell them about the blend your own bottle.
Oh, that's one of the things we just started doing here. Like I said, I love single barrels. We sell a lot of them. Store picks and all that's all the craze.
Yep.
I do think it's also can be hit or miss. I'm not going to dog Blanton's, but I'm going to go out there and say they've had bottles that I love, and I've had bottles that I'm like, and
I couldn't agree with you more. I would say any more, it's like it's 50-50 if I see it on the shelf if I'm going to pick one up, because I've had some really good Blantons, and I've had some that should have probably
kind of
been
skunks maybe.
Kicked out to the Russells
Or McKenna,
whatever.
The McKenna too.
Yeah, the McKenna.
I hear that a lot more about McKenna, I think.
Yeah.
Is that-
Four Roses, I've learned the letters I like, right? At least I can learn the letters and learn, okay, I'm not as big a fan of that one. So I've kind of figured out which ones I like. Yeah. And so they're a little bit more transparent on that makes it easy. But the blending part is something that we find is that's the biggest craft part.
Sure.
If the barrel affects the 50 to 70% of the flavor, the blending is probably the biggest art form. We try to be as consistent as we can with the cooks and the distills. Yeah. You know, we don't have a column still. We do everything on a pot. So it's a little bit harder than a column, but we also think that gives us a little bit more viscosity and that oiliness. Mm-hmm. So as we grow, we will probably always stick to pots. We think that's our kind of flavor profile.
How appropriate with Willie Nelson on the wall staring down at us that you're going to stick to pot.
Exactly. But so we started about a month and a half ago. We did a friends and family event. We picked out 6 kind of blending barrels of bourbon, 6 blending barrels of Tennessee whiskey, and 4 of rye. And we set up a whole a chemistry set, a blending set of Glencairns, flavor wheels, directions, tasting notes, all the chemistry stuff, the pipettes and everything. And we had invited 25 friends over, and we let them pick between a whiskey, a bourbon, or a rye, and they got those samples, and they got to create their own blend. Mm-hmm. They got to taste through all the barrels, make their notes. We give them a wheel that teaches them about what flavors pair well together. Because you can take a single barrel here and a single barrel here that you love both, and then you put them together, and they're like kids at a middle school dance. They go the opposite ends of the room and just separate. And you're like, what happened? Like they were delicious by themselves, and you put them together, and they were terrible.
It's not working.
It's not working, But meanwhile, you also take some barrels that maybe aren't single barrel worthy. They're very single flavor dominant. Well, those are great blending barrels. Yeah. Right? Because I need that flavor, or I need this one. So we had them come in, and such a great experience that we decided reached out to a bourbon group locally, and we said, hey, want to do this? And invited 20, and we sold it out in 15 minutes. And then we've already sold 2 more. So we're going to start doing those once a month starting on June 8th. Website should go live where people can sign up. And also if groups of 10 or more want to do a private thing where they can book it on their own, they can come in and calendar. But, being in the industry and selling these big brands, we've all gotten to go and do probably cooler experiences at the distilleries than most of the consumers get to do. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. So we thought we're trying to create experiences the consumer can come to. And I've probably been to just about every distillery of the big guys just from selling it. Yep. I think it's one of the coolest experiences from a consumer standpoint I've ever done. And once you've been to one distillery, you've been to them all, right? I mean, other than the story and the different juice, I mean, you could just take me to the tasting room. I know there's a still, I know there's a condenser. I do like going to Buffalo Trace and just peeking over the edge of the empty fermenter because you see them full and you're like, oh yeah, and then all of a sudden you walk by an empty one, and you're like, whoa. But, other than that, you can go to the tasting room. Let's taste the juice. So we're trying to come up with experiences that people can do that are a little bit above and beyond. So this is the first one we tried, and it's really cool. So if anybody's listening, check out our website or follow us. Join our Davidson Reserve Club.
We hope people are listening.
Yeah, exactly.
All of you listening.
If anyone beside my parents are.
Join our.
Hey, Mom, Dad, come on down to Nashville.
Join our Reserve Club. It's free, and you'll get up to date on when we do these. And we'd love to have you come down. It's a really cool experience. Yeah. So speaking of this is probably one of my favorite blends that Ashley Barnes did. So I'd love to hear your notes on this. This is one of my favorite bottles.
All right. So first off, the blend your own experience sounds like the perfect event for like a bachelor party.
Oh yeah.
So,
we have a lot of those here in Nashville.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
we engrave their bottle. Like it's really
you get to
cool.
leave with a bottle of your own blend.
Yeah.
So we blend that
Up to
bottle
6.
for you, and that way you can leave, and it's your bottle.
Nice.
If it's not good, it's your fault.
So you name it.
But you get to name it, engrave it. We thought about if we do a bachelorette party version, we can call it the Woohoo Experience.
Yeah. So if anybody out there is listening and you're trying to plan your bachelor party or your bachelorette party or bros or gals weekend down in Nashville, think about this.
Yeah, and invite Matt and Mark to come with you. We'll be more than happy to. And Matt will give you a tasting notes. So what are you picking up, Matt?
So speaking of, this is I get that it's older. More of the oak is coming through on the nose. It's got more of a mature nose as well. I get nougat. Like you think of the nougat from a Snickers bar, or like the inside of a Three Musketeers. So
I was wondering what
it's like a creamy sugar. I pick up some of that, and then I'm also getting like a little bit of honey, but not as much as I did with the with what we tasted first, the Tennessee charcoal mellowed. But there's a little bit of stone fruit, a little bit of the apricot comes through as well.
And vanilla and caramel.
And there's vanilla, vanilla and caramel in there as well, certainly.
But it is funny, Matt, you said that because I've gone back, I saved a little bit, and it could be because of the first glass that we had. I saved a little bit. It's been in there for a while, and it's just super sweet. And when I'm smelling with the Genesis, it's not coming across as sweet. You're talking about not as much honey, and I agree with that definitely. But I mean, it's got a great aroma, great nose to it. Everything that Matt said, and caramel and vanilla.
You know what's amazing to me though is it doesn't. There's still some floral in the nose, but it's not as floral as the Tennessee whiskey on the nose.
Yeah,
but I do get it on the taste more. I get more floral in the body, the palate than I do the Tennessee whiskey. But the nose and it's always funny because I think the honey and the sweetness is added from that sugar maple.
Yeah. That's what. So we can talk about that. Then we can talk about the Lincoln County process. Correct. Right. Yeah. So
this is a true example of the difference between Tennessee whiskey and bourbon.
Yeah.
Right.
So for people that don't, and I guess technically there are bourbons, I guess, that do some charcoal mellowing. Old Ezra 7, I think.
There are some bourbons that do it. They don't talk about. In fact, most people don't know. In the 50s, the federal government tried to require that Tennessee whiskey would be called bourbon.
Oh, really?
They tried to get rid of that category, and it would have to be called bourbon.
Huh.
And it was...
I didn't know that.
Lynn Motlow from Jack Daniel's, they went up there and lobbied
fought for it.
and said, no, we want to have a separate name. And they're like, no, but you have the same rules. You're a bourbon.
Right.
They were trying to minimize the labels and keep accuracy in labels. And it was a big fight to maintain that name.
Yeah. But to be a Tennessee whiskey, though, it has to be processed with the Lincoln County process, right?
Prior to aging, it has to be dripped through Tennessee sugar maple charcoal.
There you go.
Or not drip, just run through it.
Right.
And then the other thing that most people don't talk about in Tennessee, that most people don't know about with Kentucky, is it can never leave the state. It has to be fully distilled, aged, bottled, all in Tennessee.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
There was a big fight. I guess George, they ran out of space. I guess they sent some barrels up to Kentucky and brought them back down, and that's why they have to call it Tennessee bourbon when they sell it to people now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, because Kentucky bourbon, as long as it's aged in Kentucky for a year.
Yeah, I think it's a year or 2 years. It's got to stay in Kentucky.
To be Kentucky bourbon, it's a year. To be Kentucky straight, it has to be 2 years, right?
Yeah.
But then after that, they can ship it off wherever and bottle it wherever, and it can still be called.
Put it on boats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shoot it out of a cannon like Evil Knievel, and there's your next marketing.
Jump the Snake River Canyon, whatever you want to do, right? You do all sorts of stuff. So, all right, we're getting kind of close to the end, but before we wrap it up, everything, let's talk about kind of the future, where you guys are going. What's going on with Jenny? We're going to throw it back to you on that one, since I'm looking right at you as I asked the question. So what's the future look like?
From the past, I didn't know where I'd be sitting here today. And so who knows
you and
what
I
the
both,
future is going to look like.
Right?
I mean, that's one thing the last year has taught us, right? We have some line extensions with, Pickers cans. We're doing Whisper Creek, our flagship brand. We're coming out with a mocha and a latte canned coffee drink, which is super exciting.
Made with we actually cold brew the coffee here, so it's equivalent. It is a coffee drink. It's not just coffee flavors. We're really excited about that.
Oh, awesome.
Yep. really that's like our new SKU that'll be coming out. But other than that, just making good whiskey and sitting here and letting it age to perfection.
I mean, for us, this is kind of I hate to say pinnacle because we want to get bigger, but we made it to the whiskey, so for us, that was a really big deal. It took a long time to get there. We're so proud to actually have it out and get to sell it, and it's getting older. All my favorite whiskeys seem to be in that 6 to 8 year range. So we're only selling a certain part. We want to get all our small batches in that range. So we're really happy that most of them are 5 or 6 now. So we're getting close. I think you can tell that, look at that extra year right there on that one. Yeah. It's definitely picks up a little bit more of that profile. And I think that it's not that it's green, but the fruits are a little bit more dried flavors. Yeah. If that makes sense to me. We're doing a lot of, obviously finishing's big. So we're testing around with that, but we're doing some double oak stuff that I'm excited about.
Awesome.
We're working with ISC. They've got a lot of fun, different woods and barrels that we're testing some different types of wood out for, instead of just finishing in Madeira barrels or port barrels, testing some different double oaks of new oaks where we're going to empty and refill. We've got some fun things that'll be distillery only. We've got a good bit, about 20 or 30 barrels a year of some wheat whiskey that we accidentally created one year because we had overbought our contract. We had short run our contract with our local farmers. We made a wheat whiskey basically to the recipe of what we need to do to get rid of this wheat at the end of the year. And then a year later, we're like, man, that's really good. So we continued that. We've got some malt whiskeys. We actually added in a 150-gallon just pilot pot still. So we're getting to test around. And, for us, for the first 5 or 6 years, it was be as consistent as you can. Make 3 mash bills that are good every day. You've got enough inconsistency out there. Try to do this consistent. So now that we've gotten there, we've got some little test things we're going to play around with. And
we have a whole test committee of different employees from accounting. It's not just people in the distillery side. Mm-hmm. So they go in, and we've got our chemist. He'll, sample them on different flavor expressions, just all kinds of fun test projects and get their feedback.
If you see on my desk back there, you'll see we've actually got some test bushwhackers that you can just throw in the freezer and it freezes into a bushwhacker and you can take it on the boat with you. Just fun, crazy things. The fun part of having a plant like this is you can do anything.
Do what you want to do.
Yeah. Nothing's too stupid. Throw it against the wall, Whoever knew that cinnamon whiskey was just... or peanut butter whiskey. I'm not going to lie. When I first heard about Screwball, I didn't want to like it. I tried it.
He's drinking it.
I was like, man...
I tell you
pretty
what,
good.
mix that up with a little Chambord. I don't know if you already have, or with some Godiva chocolate liqueur.
Yeah.
PB&J.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. But I digress on that one. Well, that sounds great. So, Matt, let's get some final thoughts. We didn't really talk about the taste, I guess, that much. Talked about some nose, but what do you get on taste-wise? Look at me. I already finished mine.
What a lush. So the taste and the nose, I'm going back to it now, is opening up a lot more, getting a little more orange, almost a little apricot coming through again on the nose. But I like what you're saying about the more dried fruit, more mature fruit than the juiciness and the bright vibrance that you might pick up in a younger product. Mm-hmm. I think the few extra years really give it a little more maturity. It picks up more of the oak from the barrel, more of the toasting, and more of the sweetness as well.
And I get cherry. I don't know if I'm crazy, but do you pick up any cherry at all, or is it just me?
I don't get as much cherry on this one. Sorry, Mark.
I get some cherry in the bourbon. A little bit, but not as much in this one. This one, I get orange peel, vanilla. I get dried apricot, I get vanilla and caramel.
There you go. Yeah. All right.
This has much more rye. I pick up the pepper in it. The pepper is coming through on it. Again, it's got just that great oily viscosity to it, a nice, I don't want to call it buttery, but it's got a great oily taste to it, oily feel in the mouth. And the pepper really comes through, and I get more of the baking spice. I think the rye is really coming through. That rye really hits it's 5 to 7 to 8 year old with a rye, and this with the higher rye content coming through with some cinnamon, some nutmeg, a little bit of allspice, and some clove on the near end. Go back to the orange. I'm thinking a cloved orange. This has a lot of reminiscence of Christmas flavor.
Yeah. I think it's with that Tennessee whiskey, that charcoal mellowing does take some of that and it sweetens it.
Yeah.
It gets some of that brown sugar kind of maple sweetening to it, where this allows that kind of dried flavors and spice flavors from the rye to come back through.
Yeah.
So you can imagine if we had charcoal mellowed the wheat, when we found what we did, when we talked about earlier, is it kind of, because wheat's not as powerful as that rye, it lets everything come through. It really overtook it, in our opinion.
Yeah, I could see that you would be just left with almost a dessert whiskey than something that would be like able to sit around and sip.
Maybe we'll do it and just call it Davidson Reserve Dessert Bourbon.
No.
Dessert bourbon. Yeah, Matt's Dessert Bourbon. Yeah. We'll give him credit for that. All right, so wrapping it up, where can people find your products and you guys as well? So,
I mean, pickers you can find in probably 17 states, everywhere around. Whisper Creek's in 37 states, so please check it out. Davidson Reserve still just mainly, primarily here, a little bit in Georgia and South Carolina and Alabama, and the Panhandle. So we will probably expand that out. Well, I'd probably add about 3 or 4 states this year. But yeah, our goal is, if we only have 800,000 barrels, we might do a source brand in the future. We're not ruling that out to go bigger. But for us, I've always, every time I go to Wisconsin, I got to buy Spotted Cow, right? So
yeah, that's right. New Glarus.
Like,
I know what you're talking about.
Like,
I know what you're talking
about.
I
hope that one day we can sell it all right here, and I don't have to deal with distributors in other states.
But they can find you guys online, right? You got a website.
Yeah, PenningtonDistillingCompany.com. Actually, PenningtonDistillingCo.com.
And if you are coming to Nashville, we have our own booth at the airport where you can actually buy this after security and take it home with you.
Oh,
so that's really cool. And we're going to be opening up our own bar there in the spring, and a couple other satellite tasting rooms. So we're going to really try to expand our local footprint from an experiential standpoint. But I know we get a lot of tourists, so if they're listening on here, you don't have to buy a bottle and sneak it on the airplane. You can go after security. You can buy it. They'll even let you take it on the plane. Just don't open it up.
I was going to say, what? Yeah, it's like, that's crazy. Good to know, though.
We put a sticker on it so you don't open it up on the plane.
Don't open on plane.
Right.
Okay, sure. I got you.
In case of emergency.
Exactly. Only in emergency.
Let the oxygen mask drop down.
Open the whiskey
Open
and
the
then
whiskey.
put your mask on.
Oh, man. All right, so wrapping it up, final thoughts? Anything you guys want to add or share before we close it out?
I'll just thank y'all for coming down.
Yeah, we appreciate you.
We love, it's fun to actually most people know us for pickers. Right. So it's fun to have podcasts like this that really focus on our whiskey. So thank you so much.
Yeah, happy to do it. Matt, what about you?
Thank you so much for having us down here and having us into your place. It's nice to get out of the Bourbon Life studios after a long lockdown of Mark and I just doing remote podcasts. It's really great to see people face to face. And I think I'm just going to touch back on something that we talked about in the blending process and your decision to not source right from the start. I really respect that, because it would have been super easy to come out with source barrels, blend a great product while yours ages, and then all of a sudden you have to make this huge transition and this shift to yours, and you don't know if you're going to be able to replicate the same thing you had before. And so the commitment to quality and doing it all the way that you want to do and not buying barrels through someone else is just really something I commend you for. It's a great way to do it, and a beautiful way to have like your personality represented all the way through your whiskey. So
vodka was our sourced whiskey. So
that's great. And Jeff, I have to say it, man. Every time I look at you, I see like Jack Kennedy. I don't know if anybody's ever told you that before, but it's just kind of funny. It's like I look at the ex-president.
I hear that all the time, and I don't know.
Do you really? You do hear that? So I'm not just crazy. Okay, all right. It's just funny because I look across and I'm like,
I wish I had the Kennedy money. We could build a bigger distillery.
Yeah, there you go. Kennedy Reserve.
Kennedy Reserve.
Well, thank you all so much for having us down here. We've had a great time. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate all our listeners, wherever you guys are and whatever time of day you're listening to us. We appreciate your support. You can check us out online at thebourbonlife.net, of course, on Instagram and Facebook. So give us a shout there. And then also, we want to thank our sponsors, the Stave Restaurant out there on McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, and 3 Chord Bourbon. We appreciate their support as well. And with that said, I'm going to wrap it up. Send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the Bourbon Life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.